Okay, good morning. Um, my name is Lior Herman from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, the Department of International Relations. I'll be chairing this panel. So welcome to this panel discussion on the topic of the role of the Eastern Mediterranean for European Union energy security. As the EU strives to diversify its energy resources and supply and reduce reliance on imports from volatile regions such as Russia, the Eastern Mediterranean emerges, and I think we'll know that, as a potential critical partner. And natural gas discoveries in the region, which span countries such as Egypt, as Israel, as Cyprus, and probably other countries that will emerge, maybe Lebanon, highlight the potential to enhance European security. There are other prospects as well. We can think about green hydrogen exports, which is increasingly discussed, electricity trade, and more. So alongside these opportunities, there are also various threats and various challenges, such as unresolved maritime disputes, geopolitical tensions, and the absence of robust regional governance framework. What we're going to do in this panel, we're going to delve into these dynamics. We will examine how the Eastern Mediterranean can contribute to European energy security, diversify its import, what kind of political, economic, and legal mechanisms are necessary to ensure that this cooperation is sustainable and beneficial to all parties involved. And we are very privileged to have a distinguished panel of experts. They bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise from diverse perspectives to this discussion. We're going to have three presentations. I will already outline the three now, and then we will go straight into the presentation. Each presentation will be 15 minutes, and I'll be quite sharp on this. I'll tell you 5 minutes before and 1 minute before you have to end, and we will end after 15 minutes, and then we'll have a discussion. And we already started late this morning, okay, so we need to sort of catch up at the time. Our first presentation by Assistant Professor Eli Reti would be on the Eastern Mediterranean role in EU energy security following the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. This presentation will be followed by a presentation made jointly by Igor Klotzman and Professor Aya Wright from Bar-Ilan University. It will be on the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum as a platform for regional energy treaty. And finally, we'll hear from Dr. Yossi Mann from Bar-Ilan University and former head of the Department of Middle East Studies, which is a newcomer to this association. So we're connecting the Middle East and European studies. We will hear from Dr. Mann about the energy security and the Iron Swords War. So 15 minutes per speaker. We'll have questions at the end. And Eli, you can start. I will move there so I can see the presentations. And if the other speakers wishes to do so, they are also invited.
So you can also threaten me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You got me.
So let me know. Should I start?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. I was asked to talk a little bit about how the wars in Ukraine and Gaza have affected the energy connections between the East Mediterranean and the European Union. And I'm going to focus on three major trends. Basically, the main idea, and I'll start with the conclusions, is that both wars have made the East Mediterranean much more important for EU energy security because of three main trends. One is that the East Med has become a very important transit route for Gulf oil to get to the EU, now that the EU doesn't want Russian oil. The second is that the East Med has become more important for liquefied natural gas to diversify away from Russia. And the third is the idea of connecting renewable energy and electricity grids between the East Med and Europe. However, the argument that I will make is that in all three trends, the main connection between these two regions is going to be maritime connection. I know ideally we'd like to physically connect the two regions to one another with electricity grids and pipelines, but I will claim that it is not very viable at the moment unless governments step in and start paying for this infrastructure, not leave it to the private market. Then it will be mainly maritime routes to connect between the two regions. So the first is oil transit. Before the war in Ukraine, the global maritime oil trade looked like this. Most of the 22 million barrels of oil from the Middle East mostly went eastwards to China, to India, to Japan, etc. And 70% of the oil and 70% of the oil in Russia went west to Europe. Because of the war, Europe doesn't want to buy Russian oil anymore. So Russia is selling its oil instead to China and India at a deep discount. It's going through the northern routes and through the East Med, down the Red Sea, down to Bab el-Mandeb, and selling to India and China. Europe, that doesn't have Russian oil anymore, wants Gulf oil. And so the Gulf oil, instead of going east, it's going west. It's going up the Bab el-Mandeb, up the Red Sea, up the East Med. So a lot of new oil is coming out through this area. More than that, because of climate change, because of unprecedented drought in the Panama Canal, American oil tankers can't get through the Panama Canal. So instead, they're going through the East Med, through the Red Sea, down the Bab el-Mandeb to get to India and China, etc. That is making our area very, very busy. Since the beginning of the war, compared to before the war, there are 3 times more oil tankers and LNG tankers in our waters than before the war. It's making Greek shipping tycoons very, very rich, but it also has some challenges in terms of security and in terms of safety. There's an oil leak, etc. So that requires cooperation of all the countries around to make sure to monitor what's going on. It's also making this area, it's connecting the two. Not only is it connecting the East Med to Europe as an oil transit, it's making the East Med and the Arab Gulf basically one maritime region. It's one region connected by maritime because everything that's coming from here needs to go through here, etc. So we need cooperation between the countries to make sure that there's no blockage. That's where the war in Gaza comes in, where we're experiencing a major blockage, right? The Houthis, the Iranians saw an opportunity. So much oil is going through this area than before. So they figured if we block it, then we create a lot of pressure on Israel, on the US, to stop the war. And so that was the idea. The idea didn't really work. It didn't cause oil prices to go high for 1 month, and that's it. There's enough oil in the market. It didn't really affect it. More than that, it only encouraged something else, which is a land corridor. This idea that, okay, if the Houthis are blocking the Bab el-Mandeb, we can just build a corridor to get all the way to Europe. And I know Israelis love to talk about IMEC as the main reason for normalization with Saudi Arabia, etc. We like to talk about it, but we're not really doing anything to promote it, especially not with the war going on. Nobody wants to talk to us about the IMEC anymore. We like to talk to them about the IMEC because we need to take into account that, yes, it makes a lot of sense to do this land corridor, but there are other ways to do this land corridor that don't go through Israel. They can do it through Egypt. They can go up to Turkey and from there to Europe. It doesn't necessarily have to be through Israel. And so if we continue to drop the ball, then it will bypass us, this opportunity. So we need to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. We also need to kind of improve it with Jordan. That's a major issue that we're kind of ignoring. Okay, so that's regarding the oil. Regarding the gas, Israel has been trying for over a decade now to build gas pipelines to directly connect it to Europe. It's not working. These pipelines are too expensive. They're too deep. They're too long. It doesn't make economic sense to build this pipeline all the way to Greece, and it's not working for the past 13 years. We can't get anyone to actually pay for it. More than that, Europe doesn't want to talk about pipelines anymore. Europe, because of the war with Russia, is fed up with pipelines, not just pipelines from Russia, but the transit states in the middle that are creating so much headache. Ukraine was a lot of headache for Germany. That's why they built the Nord Stream to bypass Ukraine. If we're not using Ukraine as a transit state anymore, then Turkey becomes the major transit state for a gas pipeline. Europe doesn't want to deal with pipeline politics anymore. Europe wants LNG. It wants liquefied natural gas. It's willing to pay more for it, and it's willing to pay for new LNG intake facilities to get the LNG. Over the past 2 years, since the war in Ukraine, 14 new, all of the green dots, 14 new LNG intake facilities countries have built with EU support, with government money, not private funding, to get more LNG, non-Russian gas into Europe. So that's the opportunity. And what they want from the East Med is liquefied natural gas. And the EU came to Israel, to Egypt, signed a deal that Israel will export more gas to Egypt. Egypt will liquefy it and send it to Europe. And Israel met its side of the deal. In the past 2 years, we have doubled the amount of gas that we're exporting to Egypt. so that Egypt could liquefy it and send it to Europe. We even have plans to build 2 new pipelines to get more gas into Egypt so they liquefy it more and get it to Europe. No LNG is getting from Egypt to Europe right now. The problem is not with us. The problem is with Egypt. They don't even have enough gas for themselves. They have rolling blackouts. Since May, they haven't sent a drop of LNG to Europe, even though we're sending them the gas to liquefy it. Every molecule of gas that we're sending to Egypt, they're using it for their own economy, and it's not enough. They have rolling blackouts. So with frustration, it's encouraging a more direct route of LNG to Europe, not to go through Egypt, which not only is using all of the gas, it doesn't pay. It just accumulates debt and then asks everyone to forgive the debt. It doesn't pay. So the idea is to build a more direct route, either an LNG facility in Cyprus, maybe a floating LNG facility in Israel. I don't see that. I don't see Israelis giving shoreline for that. So it's either this or that. That's number 3. The last one, how much time do I have?
Well, 8 more.
8. Okay, I'm doing great. So we can talk more about this. Okay, so that's the idea. I can talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each one of these options, but that's the idea. The idea is a maritime route more than a physical infrastructure. The last thing has to do with connecting electricity grids between Europe and the East Med and renewable energy cooperation, right? Ideally, we would like to build an electricity cable all the way from Israel to Cyprus and from there to Greece, the Eurasia connector, right? There are plans to, Cyprus is already planning the section between Greece. With us, it's going a little slower. We have 2 problems with this idea of physically connecting the electricity grids, both from the east and from the west. From the west side, we have this whole problem between Turkey and Greece. Turkey, this week, the defense minister of Turkey announced that he will not allow the survey ships to survey where the cable needs to go until because it goes through Turkish economic waters. It does not go through Turkish economic waters. It's only their opinion that it goes through because they signed a deal with Libya that nobody recognizes. But they said that they will send warships, and that happened last June. They sent warships, and there was no surveys because of that. So that's the problem with the West. The problem with the East is this black hole over here. The electricity grids of the Gulf states are connected. The electricity grids of this area is connected. In the middle, there's Jordan, and nothing is going through Jordan right now. And it's very hard to get infrastructure through Jordan. It's the only country in this region that doesn't have even a railroad. It's very hard to get infrastructure in Jordan, and we need to work with them. So it's a major problem connecting the two. And so even in this case, electricity can float. We like to talk about electricity as something that needs to be physically connected, but not necessarily. If we start to look at renewable energy and electricity, not as an alternative energy to fossil fuels, but in this case, supplementary energy to fossil fuels, then we can do swap deals. What do I mean? If, for example, we build a lot of renewable energy, and instead of selling that green electricity to Europe directly, we sell it to Egypt, right? We build this triangle where you have solar panels in Jordan, you have solar panels in Israel, you have solar panels in the Sinai Peninsula. You get all of this green electricity to Egypt. That frees up Egypt to sell LNG to Europe, which is what the contract demands, right? Egypt is not selling LNG to Europe because it doesn't have gas for its own electricity. If it gets electricity from renewable sources, that frees up the gas to Europe. So in a sense, it's like a swap deal. You're getting green electricity to Egypt, and in return, you're getting the LNG that you wanted, right? Without the physical connection between the two sides. It sounds aspirational, but it's already happening. This is what the Saudis are doing. This is what the Emiratis are doing. They're investing a lot in renewable energy, not because they care about the environment or climate goals. The Saudis and the Emiratis are investing in renewable energy because every kilowatt of electricity that they can generate from a solar panel is a barrel of oil that they release. Instead of using it for their own electricity consumption, they can sell to Europe. So all of this renewable energy in the Gulf states is translated into more oil and more LNG from the Gulf states to Europe. And in our case, it could be translated the same way. More renewable energy in our area means more gas for Europe. So it's in their interest as well, even if we're not physically connecting the grid to one another. I'll end with that. Good, I'm within time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Live, and Igor and Ari. Well, and I will give you 2 more minutes.
Hello to everyone. I am Igor Klotzman, PhD student at Barlan University, and we're pleased to present our joint research with Professor IASEI on topic the East Mediterranean Gas Forum as a platform for a regional energy treaty. This research is particularly significant for Israel and European Union, as it explores the potential of the EMGF to strengthen energy cooperation in the region, enhance regional stability, and promote energy security. Given the importance of region's energy resources, this research highlights how both Israel and European Union can benefit from a more structured and collaborative framework. And this paper was accepted to publish in Israeli Law Review. Let's start. Small introduction. Over the past decades, the East Mediterranean has emerged as a crucial player in the global natural gas industry. Major discoveries of natural gas, such as Tamar, Leviathan, and Athena fields, have attracted global interest and transformed the region's energy landscape. However, these discoveries have also posed significant challenges, including energy security concerns, risks of geopolitical tensions, and disputes over gas reserves and maritime boundaries. And to address these challenges and promote collaboration, the EMGF was initially established by Egypt in 2018 as a platform for dialogue among gas producers, consumers, and transit countries. In 2020, the EMGF evolved into a regional intergovernmental organization following the sign its statute. As of today, the EMGF comprises 8 full members. It's Cyprus, Egypt, France, Greece, Italy, Israel, Jordan, and Palestine, and 3 observers. In other words, we have 4 European Union member states and European Union itself as one of the 3 observers. Reflecting the European Union's a strong interest to in region's energy resources and the development of sustainable energy market in the region. At the same time, Israel is member of only one of International Organization of Energy, which is the EMGF. Therefore, this highlights the forum's unique role in the fostering collaboration and dialogue in the region, contributing to ensuring Israel's and Europe energy security. Apart from EMGF members, the EMGF also collaborates with major European companies such as Total Energy and Eni, alongside with American and other companies like Chevron through technical committees to advance regional cooperation. These companies play an important role in exploration and development of gas reserves across the exclusive economic zones in the East Mediterranean, driving the region's energy landscape and ensuring a strategic alignment with European Union and Israel's interests. On this slide, we can see the evolution and key developments of the EMGF. As I said in slide number 1, the EMGF was initially established by Egypt in October 2018 as a platform for dialogue among consumer transit countries. And this led to the next meeting of energy ministers in January 2019. This led to during which the Cairo Declaration was signed. The Cairo Declaration is one of the first legal framework of this organization. Next, we move to to solve further negotiation and engagement of international stakeholders, including Egypt and United States signed memorandum on an energy cooperation. Next, these efforts culminated to sign the statute of organization in 2020, and this statute provides the MGF established an official intergovernmental organization, known the forum. In March 2021, France joined a full member to the forum, highlighting the increasing Europe interest in the East Mediterranean. At the same time, the observer status was granted to the United States, European Union, and World Bank Group. In November 2021, Egypt and Israel signed also a memorandum to foster national gas cooperation. This year, also Egypt and Israel signed memorandum to enhance gas supplies, and therefore today the MGF stands as a significant platform for energy cooperation and dialogue, balancing the interest between its members in very complex region. Next important dates, it's since 2022, the MGF has played a particularly significant role for both the European Union and Israel in achieving common interests. The extraction and transportation of natural gas from the Mediterranean have become key topics, driven by large reserves in the region and the energy crisis in Europe following the Ukraine-Russian war. In response, the Europe has turned to the Mediterranean for natural gas imports, highlighted by a memorandum of understanding between the European Union, Egypt, and Israel on cooperation related to trade, transport, and export of natural gas to Europe. This memorandum was signed during the meeting in Cairo and highlights the important role of the MGF in regional cooperation. Next, another important agreement is the MGF and International Energy Forum cooperation. These two organizations signed a memorandum to advance regional dialogue on gas market security, decarbonization, and transparency. And this organization will collaborate together and provide benefits for regional energy market. Next, according to the EMGF statute, is one of the legal acts of this organization. The EMGF was designed to support the member efforts to monetize their reserves, utilize existing infrastructure, develop a regional gas market, ensure security of supply and demand, foster cooperation, support producing countries, ensure the environmental sustainability, and other issues. However, the statute does not contain clear and mandatory obligation for the EMGF members. And this raises several questions: how a regional intergovernmental organization can effectively promote and collaborate to achieving these goals. And next.
So this leads us to the disadvantages, shortages of this forum, which is the topic of our article, where we suggest several improvements of the organization. So it doesn't have any legally binding obligations. It's basically a forum for dialogue and discussion. It doesn't have a binding dispute settlement mechanism, which we lawyers like there to be. And we show in the article why there is customary international law that is relevant, but it's really insufficient to ensure what is needed. You heard here problems with issues of borders, issues of transit of energy. If you had a binding legal treaty that requires the parties to allow free transit of energy, that could give a more stable environment for transit. It also could convince more private companies to come and invest, because it makes the whole project less risky. So what we have suggested here is to take the EMGF and go one further step ahead, which is to sign an actual treaty between the 8 parties and whoever else wants to join. And we've seen the same thing in, for instance, the European Energy Charter, which started the ECT, the Energy Charter Treaty, which started as a declaration involved into a treaty with binding commitments. We're suggesting to follow suit here. And for instance, and of course there's a lot of conflicts in the area, which makes things much more complicated, not just between us and the Palestinians and the Gaza war, which we are now, but also conflicts between Greece and Turkey, between Turkey and Cyprus, etc. So what we're suggesting is several things. First of all, as I said, to try to advance to a treaty with more binding commitments, with a more institutionalized setting for the relations, to provide a comprehensive dispute settlement mechanism. Also to talk about about ensuring free transit, unobstructed transit of energy, which could be both electricity and in general to widen the scope of the EMGF. And in particular, what we think is really important is to widen the scope of the EMGF to include also renewable energy, because this is the energy of the future. And an organization which is completely only based on fossil fuel, it's very unhealthy in many ways these days, both for our health and for the political health of this organization. And we can see as an example again what happened to the ECT, the Energy Charter Treaty, which is being blamed by many environmental organizations. There's a lot of criticism against it because it's only promoting fossil fuel and not renewable energy. As a result, many European states have announced that they're going to withdraw from the Energy Charter Treaty. We don't want that to happen to the EMGF. And the EMGF needs to justify its existence. It needs to show that it's relevant and can really contribute to the area. So we think that this regional energy treaty could promote energy security and sustainability to meet the region's future energy needs, while also contributing to a greener and more sustainable future. And it will also provide a better environment for investment by private investors. Regarding transit, Eli already discussed that. So I will just add that transit is really important, and it needs to have a stable regional and legal framework. I would say that you mentioned that not only this area is not inside Turkey's EEZ, but also according to international customary law, the country does not have the right to prevent free shipping in the EEZ, only in your own territorial waters. So Turkey is completely off the wall here, but sometimes might speaks and not right. So basically, that this is what we suggest. It should expand its activity to all kinds of renewable energy. And there is a lot of potential here for cooperation between the parties. What one is missing, somebody else has. Take, for example, the MOU that was signed between Israel and Jordan, whereby there would be solar energy produced in Jordan because they have vast areas which we don't have. And we would provide them with desalinated water. Okay, so, and the example that you mentioned about Egypt, about how to allow LNG to be shipped. There's a lot of potential here in if you once you widen the package and you put in more types of energy into the mandate, you also open a wide potential for more cooperation, regional cooperation, which also will make this organization more relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now move to Dr. Mann's presentation.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Once again, thank you for having me. It's an important panel with my friends from Bar-Ilan University, my friends and colleagues. Let me start with a disclaimer, and then it will explain my argument later on. Before joining the academia, I was working in a trading house, and we used to trade oil. And when these kind of events, geopolitical events happen, these energy security events, that was the time the traders would made their money. And we were, I'm not sure if that's the accurate term, happy when these events happened, because we knew that when energy crisis happened, that's the time for traders to make their own money. But that's exactly what we'd like to claim here. The time have changed. Time has changed. The meaning that in the past, geopolitical events, energy security events, had a long period of time of impact, and the price the price increased dramatically because of these events. But nowadays, we can see a change in two ways. First of all, energy security events, geopolitical events have a very limited time, like we see here in the Iranian attack or other examples, and the impact on the price is quite limited. This is what I'm trying to say, that we need to reconsider the meaning of the energy security events. We need to reevaluate what is the real impact of energy security, energy crisis in this region and in general. If we understand that the energy security events has limited time, it's a shortened time of impact, and if we understand that the price is not reacting like in the past, maybe we need to change our policy. Maybe we don't need so much SPR, strategic petroleum reserve, in the United States or in China, for example. The Chinese are holding around 700 million barrels in storage, and the Americans around 370 million barrels in storage, but just because of these events. So if we understand that there is a change in the market, and the markets are now understanding the risk, understanding or knowing how to evaluate the risk better than in the past, maybe we need to change our policy understanding regarding energy security events. And I think the reasons why the market have changed there are two reasons for that. First of all, if you look at the past 10, 15 years, you see more and more geopolitical events or the energy security events, starting from the Arab Spring, and then the familiar attack of ISIS on Kirkuk, the northern fields in Iraq, and then the internal conflict between Saudi Arabia in Iran, in OPEC, and other events like the attacks of the Iranians on the Saudi Arabian oil facilities in 2019, and the attacks on the oil tankers in Persian Gulf. So we see a lot of events, and the markets learn how to deal with it. And since they know how to deal with it, they know to evaluate it. And the second reason, which we will see later on, is technology. We now use technology to assess the risk. In the past, it was quite difficult to assess the risk. Okay, we didn't have satellite, for example. Okay, now we can assess any event in real time by satellites. So because of that, we can assess the risk in any energy security event. And therefore, we need to rethink about what does it mean, energy security event or geopolitical risk. Which brings me to the Gaza war. Of course, when it comes to history, of course, we see that we all remember these events. Okay, and this is what influenced us, because we see lots of events, historical events that shape the price of oil. They're all related mainly to war and geopolitical events like the Kuwait invasion, Gulf War, Venezuela War, Nigeria War, Iraq invasion. They're all related to the energy market, and we see the spike in the price, and therefore, because of these historical events, we think that these events will influence the markets once again, and there will be an impact on the price and the supplies. What I'm trying to say is that these are no longer relevant. The market have changed, and therefore we see less impact on the market, and we can see it now with the Gaza war. Because what happened in the Gaza war is actually we didn't see any impact on the markets beside the Iranian attack on Israel, the Israeli attack on Iran, which was a very short time of impact. We didn't see any impact. we saw actually decrease in the price. The price of oil was before the war around around $90 a barrel for the Brent barrel, and around $85 for the WTI, and now the Brent price is 73. Okay, and during the whole year, the price was actually around $75 a barrel for the Brent price. So actually, we see a decrease in the price of oil and not increase because of the change. And even though we have the Houthi attacks and the Iranian threat, we see a decrease in the price. And the reason is, first of all, we are oversupplied in the market. There is plenty of oil right now. There is huge spare capacity, the capability to produce. The Saudis and the UAE and the Kuwait, they all have together around 1.3 million barrels a day to add to the market. So we are oversupplied. And also, like Eli said, most of the oil that goes from the Middle East or the Persian Gulf actually goes to the east and not to the west. It's almost I would say that 80% of the oil that's exported from the Persian Gulf goes to the east and not to the west. Therefore, the impact of the Houthis attack is very limited. So what I'm saying that actually there was no impact on the market besides the Iranian attack. I think the market also learned from what happened in Russia. Okay, there is an ongoing, of course, a war in Russia, and we can see also then the impact on the price was limited and short-living. For example, right after the Russian invasion to Ukraine, the price spiked by $30 from $90 to $130. But after a while, after a month, right after the UAE announced the OPEC will add production, will add the production to the market, the price decreased in 1 day by $20. 1 day, okay, by announcement. Just by announcement, they announced it in Twitter. Once again, technology. Okay, how do you spread the information? So if in the Russian case, the impact was very limited, and the Russian is a much bigger producer of oil compared to Iran. When it comes to oil, the Russians produce around 10 million barrels a day, while the Iranians right now are producing 3 million and they are exporting only 1.5. So there is a limiting impact from the Iranian side compared to the Russian. And once again, during the invasion and after, we saw decrease in the price, not increase in the price. And therefore, when we think about the Gaza, it's another case study to see that we need to think about what is the meaning of energy crisis. And I want to show you a few examples from recent years. And this is the most important one. Okay. I don't know if you remember the attack on the Saudi facilities in 2019. The drones from Yemen and the missiles from Iran. They shoot missiles toward the main facilities of Saudi Arabia. Actually, because of that, they need to cut production from 10 million to 5 million, and the market spiked. Like you can see it here. Okay, that's the Aramco attack. It was in Saturday. It was quite clever because the markets are closed. Then it's a huge panic. So you can see the markets were closed. In the beginning, spiked by $15, around $15. But after 3 days, it vanished. Okay, there was no impact. What happened? What happened is that Planet, the company that made the images from satellite, published this image a day after the attack, and engineers, examined the images and said, "Look, this is something we can solve in 3 days." And they announced it, and the market fell like $50 3 days after. Same thing happened when they attacked the Iranian attacks on the Persian Gulf. In the beginning, when the Iranian attacked ships and tankers in the Persian Gulf, there was a spike. But after a while, with this technology, the maritime traffic and all these platforms that actually gives you in real time where each tanker is located. So the market evaluated which tanker was attacked. how much was inside in real time, okay? And after 15 minutes, the price decreased because they understood it's small tankers, okay? We can confiscate on these tankers. Therefore, there was a very limited impact to the risk. What I'm saying that the Gaza war and other events in the past teach us that we need to rethink about energy security. I'm not sure, okay, that we have the same impact that we had, and therefore policymakers maybe should reconsider the meaning on their economy and their policy and what they are trying to do in order to create energy security. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for three really fascinating presentations. We heard about the critical war, which maritime routes have for oil, gas, and to some extent renewable energy and electricity trade, and how they interact and the physical aspect of maritime routes in sort of creating a region, which is then reinforced by what Igor Klotzman and Professor Ayaraj told us, and how regionalism can be further cemented via institutionalism and via legal provisions. And then Dr. Mann told us about perhaps how security and geopolitics have a lesser impact than we believe they have. And this paves the way for more optimism. And I think fresh opportunities in our region, and I'm sure this is going to feature in the discussion. As the discussant and chair, I'm going to ask each of the presenters one question, and then I'll throw a few general questions. And we'll have a first round, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So for Dr. Rettig, my first question is so the idea of grid interconnection is important and even critical in the world, which is based on renewable energy. And it is really a nice idea to explore how it releases the bottleneck of LNG exports to Europe. But the countries in the Mediterranean are not really in a position to supply enough electricity to themselves, right? And I think you rightly said that the grid itself requires significant infrastructure upgrade. So that's an economic problem, but there's also the security problem, right? Grid interconnections bring back the same pipeline politics we know. And in fact, in the past, if you examine the region, you'll see that there were numerous attempts to interconnect grids, and they failed, shamefully failed, actually, because of security and geopolitical considerations. And I'm not just talking about Israel and its neighbors, I'm talking about across the region. So how can you overcome this security on the one hand and techno-economic on the other hand problem? So that's for you. Then for the two of you, cementing international energy relations seems very logical and a good thing to do, and I support that. And there are all sorts of agreements between states regulating energy trade and investment relations. However, one thing which is quite evident is that those who are willing to sign such agreements and commit to rules and obligations are mostly importing and perhaps transit economies. So when you look at the European Energy Union, the Energy Community, IAEA, and so on, it's largely about the import. And exporting states are actually less willing to sign to obligations and commit to rules and norms. And this is quite evident if you look at the WTO or the USMCA, the former NAFTA agreement, and certainly OPEC and so on with its problems. So these are really fine examples of how the problematic nature of such a cooperation among exporters is taking place. So given that the European, the energy, the EMGF, right, the Energy Forum, was set up mainly by exporters, why would you think that this would be different, right? That this time it would be different, and that they would be willing to commit to something which is actually binding beyond what's now. And for Dr. Mann, I think the arguments you make are very important, and they certainly tell us a lot about what had happened to fossil geopolitics. Do you think that this is also relevant in a world, particularly in Europe, that is going to be much more heavily reliant on renewable energy? And bearing in mind that renewable energy are not a panacea to fossil energy resources, there are various issues such as intermittency, storage, and so on. So will we see the old geopolitics, or will we see a new thing? Now, very quickly, I'll skip one question here and just have two for the sake of having more time for everybody. Very recently, that mean last week, the new European Commission was nominated, and the new DG dedicated for the Mediterranean, distinct from DG NEAR. What does it mean for EU energy security? Are we going to see much more involvement of the EU in this region for the sake of increasing energy and security? So that's one question. I'd like to have your thoughts on this. And finally, energy security is important. I think we all know that it's fundamental at any aspect, right? For every nation, for every human being, whether you're an importer, exporter, and so on. And it's certainly a key issue for the EU in many aspects. When it comes to availability, accessibility, affordability, and acceptability, what is known as the 4 A's framework, right? That make up energy security. But energy security is not really isolated from other issues, such as food and water security or climate change. And one of the most obvious contrasts between the EU and its Mediterranean partners is that in the context of climate change, the EU is actually placing great emphasis on the issue of climate mitigation, right? So reducing gas emissions. Yet for most countries in the Mediterranean, the key issue is actually suffering from climate consequences, and therefore they need to adapt rather than to mitigate, adapt to extreme weather events, droughts, fires, desertification, and so on. So the focus is really on adaptation to climate change. These are different aspects. So given this difference and the fact that the transition to renewable energy plays a major role in energy security and climate change mitigation, how do you see EU-Med relations evolve, right? Different interests in this sort of nexus, right? How do you see them evolve? What can be done? So this is for you, and you'll have the very difficult task of answering in 3 minutes, each of you. And good luck. Yeah, Eli.
Okay. Oh, I'll answer the question that you, the first one, and that will relate to the other one. So it was an excellent question, right? You said if we're starting to connect electricity grids to one another, then we run into the pipeline politics of yesteryear, right? And that's a really good issue, because what Yossi said about how oil crises don't affect prices anymore because the world is saturated with oil has to do a lot with how we transit oil versus gas and electricity. Oil is a very easy commodity to transit because it's a liquid. I put it in a tanker and I ship it. And if someone doesn't want to sell me oil, I'll get it from somewhere else because I can get it by sea, right? So Europe, it was very easy for Europe not to buy Russian oil anymore because it was American oil, there was Nigerian oil. Oil came from other places because it's liquid. It's easy to transit. It doesn't work like that with gas, right? If you say, I don't want your gas and the gas is getting to me, I built a $5 billion pipeline. Because it's gas, I can't just put it on a tanker. I need to get it directly, physically connect the well with the gas all the way to whoever's consuming it, right? So I need to build a $5 billion pipeline to get the gas to me. If for some reason I don't want your gas anymore, well, good luck. You need to build another 5 billion pipeline to someone else who's going to sell you the gas. And if you don't have that already, then you can't just disconnect from it, right? So when we're talking about energy security, Europe doesn't have an oil problem and has a gas problem with Russia. And so that's where LNG comes in. If you liquefy the gas, you're creating this oil kind of dynamics where you can get the LNG from different places. It's much more expensive. And today, only 30% of the gas traded around the world is LNG because it's expensive, but it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so that overcomes the pipeline politics. But what Lior is saying is, if we now move to renewables, we're going back to the pipeline politics. We're going back to physically connecting everyone with electricity. That could be that. Then you're reliant on geography again. Then you're reliant on transit states again, and then you're back to the gas politics. And that's a good comment. I think one of the ways to overcome that is to liquefy electricity, and that's something that hydrogen is supposed to do, right? We talked about how renewable projects in Egypt can release LNG. And renewable projects in Saudi Arabia release oil. But that's the first step. The next step that the Saudis are planning and that the Egyptians are planning is to do green hydrogen, is to take all of that renewable energy, produce green hydrogen, liquefy it, and then sell that green hydrogen to Europe and to Asia, et cetera. And that way you still localize renewable electricity, but you turn it into something that you can then ship in liquid form. And that's the only way to overcome that. Otherwise, you're creating in Europe, you can talk about connecting electricity grids to one another. And even the Europeans are having a difficult time connecting the electricity grids to one another. In Asia, with the geography and in the Americas, et cetera, it's going to be much more difficult. And so green hydrogen could be a good solution, just like LNG is a solution for pipeline quality.
Okay, thank you. And there's a big hype on green hydrogen, but also a big question mark. Even several.
You asked me about whether exporting states would be willing to bind themselves with the legal commitment. So first of all, generally speaking, I'm not. I don't have any illusions that countries will bind themselves so easily, especially in this region, especially at this time and age, and between Israel and these Arab states. It's not going to happen so fast. Having said that, I think that there are exporters and there are exporters. So you have very strong exporters that they might prefer not to bind themselves. But if you have weak exporters, like Israel, for instance, we want to export our natural gas, and we do need parties to buy this gas, and we do need, for instance, the EU to invest in gas pipelines, et cetera, then we might be convinced that it's worthwhile for us to, on one hand, assume on ourselves obligations, on the other hand, to get stability and to get guarantees that there will be markets. Or because you need, when you say energy security, you tend to talk about energy security of supply, but you also need security of export. If you have all these gas, you need to be sure that you have a market to sell it to, and that too is something that is worth a lot for a state, especially if you're not a very, very strong exporting state like China or United States. You want to add?
And in addition, it could create a sustainable investment climate for maybe possible future project in the region, not only trade, but gas production or building new infrastructure such as pipeline or how we see East Med pipeline. And to get agree, it could provide some consensus with the help of European Union and the United States, because we saw a lot of benefits for the region, how both with its party, the European Union provided more sustainable environment in the region with Barcelona declaration, and the United States conclusion, the Abraham Records, that promote sustainable regional market, mitigates political conflicts.
So I just add, the EU and the US has a very important role here to do that, to facilitate those kind of agreements. It's not going to happen without it, but they have an interest in doing so.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Mann?
So you asked me whether we can use this concept on other energies, like for example, renewable energies. Of course, my argument is that if we will share more information, we will have stable prices. And we can also do it in other sectors, not just in the oil sector. We can do it in the renewable energy sector. Of course, we would like to know what is the situation of the wind farm, what was the impact of any crisis to the solar project or any biomass plant. If there is a challenge or a crisis or a need to repair, of course, if we will share more information, the market will know what is the real situation. I think the EIA model, the American Administration Office, the American Energy Office, is the model. I'm looking from the trading perspective. I can tell you that for traders, EIA, the publication are the most reliable and the most influential. Any publication of this office create a move and a change in the market, because the market understand and trust this publication. So I think if we will have a project that will share information, give more information regarding what's happening in every sector, we will have a stable energy prices in every continent and in every sector.
Thank you. So we'll now open it for questions. we don't have a lot of time, okay? So try to sort of have your question pinpointed, okay? So Professor Tobias.
Yes, very briefly on two subjects that have not been mentioned. First, Trump. I want only say Trump is for opening free fracking and liberating the market. This is disruptive for the world markets, I suppose. And also he's not eager to create more international institutions, this is for you, Ari, international cooperation, etc. Trump is quite hostile. For example, in the WTO, he's not naming someone to this dispute settlement. So I don't see at all going in your direction. That's one. And the other one is about something that I learned, that Italy is in dire straits concerning its importing of oil, and is starting a bilateral policy of signing agreements according to the Mattei project, and getting all the oil possible, because I understand, and I want you to tell me that from January on, the connection with Russia, which is very important to Italy, is broken, and the hell will broke there.
Yeah.
And thank you. It was fascinating. You were all implicitly describing the substitution process as a result of the war in Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas war. And an important component of that is the opportunity cost. And I would like you, maybe if you can make a comparison between the factors that led to minimize the opportunity cost in the Ukrainian and the Israeli case to other case. I mean, can we generalize the Israeli and the Ukrainian case to other cases when we're talking about minimizing the opportunity cost?
Thank you. Yes.
One question about how you think the dynamic inside of Europe regarding to the use of nuclear energy basically affects its willingness to diversify towards the Middle East in regards to energy.
Thank you. If this is your last chance to ask questions, yes.
Okay, I just ask a clear question to everybody, because everybody was speaking about energy interconnectivity and creating maybe also more institutionalized cooperation in the region. But actually, maybe, well, not maybe, probably the conclusion that many Israelis draw from the last year is that we need more to rely on ourselves. And we see it also in other countries in the region. There is more kind of an inward-looking approach. So how do you see this kind of contradiction between what people, population think and believe in, and not only population, but also the professionals in the field, and what you're proposing?
Okay, so the tough task, 1.5 minutes for everyone. We'll start with you.
I believe the markets are efficient, so we don't need to rely on ourselves. I think when we see that the Russians case, we see although they are under sanctions, they are sending the dark fleet to Europe. Okay, they're still exporting oil to Europe, and we see what's happening in Iran. We see the growing export of oil from Iran to China and other market. The market are efficient. The oil is something we need, and gas is something we need. We will find a way to get it. Okay, this is my concept. That's why I'm not sure we need to rely on ourselves. I think the market will bring us the products we need.
Thank you.
So, as I said before, I don't have illusions. I think that from all the proposals we make, the one about widening the mandate into renewable energy is the most immediate one that can be acceptable at this time. But sometimes you write an article not necessarily making proposals for this coming year, maybe for 5 years, 10 years. At some point, the time will be right for countries to realize that they do need a more institutionalized system, a more binding system. And right now, you're right, the WTO is in a bit of a crisis right now. For the last 7-8 years, with this appellate body hasn't been functioning, but they're trying to solve it. We are also, by the way, suggesting ISDS, investor-state dispute settlement, which also is not very popular these days, but things might change. Regarding inward, I think the ups and downs. Again, these are conjunctions. I mean, we have time, and also the Corona time. People were talking about closing the borders and being more inward looking. At some point, they realize that it's not sustainable. They need to cooperate.
Thank you, Eli.
Trump is not as disruptive to energy markets as we tend to think. It's true that during his 4-year presidency, he withdrew from the Paris Agreement. Having said that, during these 4 years, the US broke records in terms of renewable energy integration and production during these 4 years. So Trump lets the market do what it does. If it makes financial sense, then he will allow it to happen. He's not going to cancel the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, because the states in the US that are most benefiting from these renewable subsidies are in the South, where the Republican states, where all of the sun and the wind is. So he's probably not going to divest from that. He's very pro-nuclear. So yes, he's pro-shale, etc. But he will let the market dynamics, his basically mantra is not to intervene, not to let the state intervene. But at this point, renewable energy makes financial sense. It has become so efficient, etc. Then I'm less concerned in what Trump will do, other than the international organizations, which he will probably not take part in the new financing mechanism that the COP29 couldn't agree on. Regarding the Italy, it has to do with the type of oil. Not all refineries can deal with the same type of oil. Italy was too dependent on Russian oil. It needs to buy oil from somewhere else, but the refineries are not built for different types of oil. It doesn't mean that hell will break loose in Italy. It just means that it will cost them more. They'll have to pay more for it. Regarding what's going on in Europe and nuclear and the population, etc., it's a good issue, and it has to do with the security of exporters, not just the security of supply. Because the EU is talking in two voices. It's saying we don't like fossil fuels, we want to mitigate, we want to decarbonize, etc. It's also saying give me more LNG, give me more oil, give me everything, because I'm in a crisis right now.
We're closing down nuclear.
While closing down nuclear. And so it's investors say, okay, the EU is telling me, it's telling Nigerians, it's telling us, it's telling Egyptians, give us more LNG, build a new LNG facility. An LNG facility is $5 billion. It takes 4 years to build. By the time I finish building it, will you still want my LNG? Will there still be a war in Russia? Will you still want expensive, or you're going to say, no, I don't want LNG anymore. So I need the security that you're going to buy the fossil fuels for me right now. LNG has an advantage in that sense. I'm not going to build a pipeline. I'm going to do LNG because if you don't want my LNG, then I'll sell it to China and Asia later on. But when it comes to electricity grids, etc., the EU needs to make up its mind of what it is saying to exporters. It needs to give a profit, to promise a profit to whoever's going to take the risk.
Thank you very much. I think this has been a very interesting panel. It really brought up all the aspects of markets versus security and geopolitics and technical issues. We've also started, I think the focus here was starting from the southern parts of the Mediterranean, and we actually, in the discussion, we moved more to the northern part of the Mediterranean, which was quite interesting. I want to thank the 4 speakers for excellent presentations. I want to thank the audience, and we had a very interesting discussion. So thank you very much, and we move on to the next panel.